For our final activity in the ArcGIS Pro introductory series, I want to go ahead and demonstrate to you how, we as landscape architects could start to take advantage both of data that's available to us that we've created through our analyses here in ArcGIS Pro, as well as using outside planning support tools. And so in particular, we're going to talk about soils, right? And so we've been talking about, in this latest skill development, we've been talking about topography, we've been talking about stormwater. Now we've got to talk about soils as a component of this as well, right? And so again, I can go ahead and turn on, projections into the landscape, and I can zoom in on a part of the landscape and start to look at kind of where water's flowing. And right here, I've got some infrastructure. I can see I've got a road in here. What if we were looking to site a building in this location? Well, what information would we need to figure out, should we site a building over here versus over here? We've got two relatively flat spots. You're seeing the slope analysis in behind us. We've got some green areas that look to be kind of in and around these existing driveways. We know that we've definitely got some, we're going down the hill here gently, but we're going downhill into this. Is there a possibility of having some kind of facility tucked into the hillside, right? A lot of that just depends on what's actually going on with the soils that are on the site. And I will tell you that you can go and you can get soils data. A lot of it, I'm going to start to zoom out to where I start seeing the polygons appear for South Dakota here. A lot of it's going to look something like this, and when we click on it, you're going to get some very, very, generalized information. This is well-drained soil. I'm not shocked by that. But again, I'm so far zoomed out that the reality of it is that a soil map kind of that's been summarized at a state level is of very, very little use to us. Unfortunately, at the site level, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and zoom back into my site level here. At the site level, unfortunately, what we're going to run into is that to get access to the type of soil data that you're going to want for informing site decisions, say, again, back in this part of the landscape, requires understanding the vast and complex database structure that has been set up by the Natural Resource Conservation Service in order to to bring together and characterize soils across the United States. And what that really involves is that you have to add a polygon layer and then a series of tables that have to then be joined back to that original polygon layer. It is something that I am willing to teach you individually. It is not something that is a good use of our time for teaching introductory, those who are just learning ArcGIS. And so it's a complex data set. I will tell you that while it's gaining in popularity and maybe there'll be some better changes that'll make better products for us coming out in the future, what we're actually seeing is that the scientists working in this space are actually saying that we need more precision in our soils data before it's worth investing further. So how do we pull together those two competing sides? Is that we need data to work with. The data is incredibly complex in ArcGIS. The scientists are telling us that they need to go out and be collecting better and more site-specific information about soils across the country. And again, that's not going to make the data less complex. So how do we go about doing it? Well, one of the things I would suggest is that you can run this for your entire site just by setting up, following this process for your entire site. But I would actually encourage you to think strategically about where you pull soils information. Instead of running it for the entire site, why not use some of the information you have available to you already and make some decisions about what you're thinking about putting in terms of the program for this particular location? Again, if we were looking at a visitor's, a backcountry visitors facility and started to look at these two different kind of pullouts that have been created into the landscape and wanted to understand how buildable the soils are there, or just understand some more information about it, how would we go about doing that? Well, we have to go back to one of our earlier lessons. And what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to go ahead and let's go ahead and just here underneath our folder for this project, I want you to go ahead, we're going to create a new shapefile, right? And we have to use a shapefile. So, you can also create a feature class when you're creating new information inside your geodatabase. This needs to be a shapefile, unfortunately, and that's just because we're going to use a planning support tool that requires this as the input. All right, so go to New, go to shapefile. When it jumps in underneath shapefile, what we're going to actually do is we're going to do our site selection 1. It seems good enough for me. A polygon is all I need. Realistically, I mean, I can just jump down and use the current map settings for my coordinate system. I don't think I need to tell it anything else. I'm going to go ahead and click run. Let this go ahead and create a new shapefile for me. Once that is there, I'm going to go over to edit. I'm going to click on create. I'm going to click on my site selection. I'm going to click on polygon. And like I said, you know, I don't have to be super specific about this, but I can probably just go ahead and run down the highway here and just create a boundary. And then I kind of want to look at that part of the landscape, and let's go ahead and kind of round it out over here. Double click on it. I'm going to go ahead, and that looks good to me. Everything that I've got there, I'm going to go ahead and click on save. I'm going to save my edits and clear my selection. Now I've done everything that I can. So again, I've used the information available to us. I've looked at slope. I've looked at water flow through the sites. Now I want to bring soils information in to understand it. One of the things that, again, obviously always kind of helps out with this is that we could come in and change out our symbology here, and just, you know, kind of change it so we can still see our site. That's always beneficial. Maybe I'll get fancy and put a dash line around it. Anyway, so what we're going to do now, though, is that I'm actually going to go ahead and jump over to my web browser. I'm going to type in web soil survey. Once I'm there, I'm going to go ahead and come in. This is the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's actually the agency's the Natural Resource Conservation Service. I'm going to click on Start. Once I've got here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and create an area of interest, AOI, area of interest, from a shapefile, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to ArcPro Skill 5, Site Selection 1, and it wanted my shape.shp, I think was what it was looking for. I need to scroll that back. All right. .shp, I've got that. My .shx, and then it needs a .prg, and this is optional, and I don't know that I have a dbf, but I can look. Oh, I do. May as well go ahead and include it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and then click Set AOI, and what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and zoom in on this part of the landscape for me. So soils information, you can actually see that that stream that comes under the highway is real. You can see that popping in here. But now that we got our area of interest created, I'm actually going to go ahead and click over to my soil map. And what it's going to do is it's going to actually go ahead and tell me what kind of soil is. Oops, I don't want to zoom in. I want to just go ahead and look for information in this landscape. I can go ahead and click on this anywhere, and it will tell me at a very, very site detailed level exactly what is what soil types are underneath here, right? And so again, we can kind of look through this information. You can look at an overall summary of the site here, that the vast majority of it is actually set up here, you know, under this. But again, let's get into, we're trying to use the data. Well, fortunately, the NRCS has actually created a soil data explorer, and we can go in and look at basic properties. So the intro to soils here, and it can tell us lots of different information about that. I actually want to look at suitability. So suitability analysis here specifically for building sites. And I'm looking, you know, one of the most restrictives is building dwellings with a basement. I don't know that you'd necessarily create a basement here, but let's just take it, you know, that's the most restrictive, and it tells me that that is not a good option, right? What if I looked at without a basement and ran the same thing? It's also going to tell me this is not a good place. And so what you're starting to get into here is that should you want to actually put a building in this landscape, it's going to get very expensive. Now, in addition to that, you can also come down and start to look at things like, what would this part of the site be really useful for, right? And so there's some information about crops that are definitely in here, you know, which types of crops. This is western South Dakota. I'm guessing not a lot. So let's look at forest productivity. And it says it can't run forest productivity in this landscape. Anyway, in some locations you'll be able to get some of that information. The other things that you can start to look at is that you can go through and kind of click through different options here and look at things like erosion hazard. So if we wanted to, create a new trail, understanding the erodibility of these different soils would be really useful information, right? We can go through, I'm not sure why that's not coming up. Part of it's because I haven't worked in Western South Dakota ever before with data. All right, so I am getting some information to pop up now that would probably come back into play on this. And so when you look at it, the likelihood of how erodible the soil is, what it's rated for, all of these descriptions, all this information is now provided for you, right? So what we've done now is that we're using this planning support tool. And again, it's not perfect. We can build around some of the limitations of site. It is possible. It is expensive. But this can help us make better decisions. And again, if these areas aren't right for developing a new facility, maybe there is somewhere else on the landscape, which would lead us back to here. Instead of looking at that, part of the landscape, maybe we should be looking somewhere else, right? So for instance, maybe we should be coming back over, and who knows, we could go take a look over here where they actually place the facilities, and again, get some additional soils information about that. But again, this is how we start to pull all of this data together into something that looks very useful to us. So we've covered a lot of different things, but we've covered how to visualize topography, how to understand aspect, and then we can start to connect that both to user experience in terms of user comfort in different seasons. We can also tie that to vegetation. We've developed our contours. We've looked we've also looked at slope analysis. So where can trails, where can roads go, right? Where can sidewalks that are ADA accessible go within the landscape? These are all important questions to us. We've looked at stormwater analysis, right? Understanding how water flows downhill and being able to automate that so that even with a few errors that happen in these models, we can get a quick snapshot, and then we can work within that snapshot to better manage the stormwater that is, moving through this landscape. And then ultimately we've come back around here to how do we bring soils and how do we start to think about combining this information together to evaluate the landscape and its potential for the types of facilities we're trying to develop within our program and with our clients. That's all we've got. I know we've covered an awful lot in the last 5 skill development activities. So refer to your assignment sheet for what you have to turn in for this one, and let me know if you have any other questions.